All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast and This Week in the News. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we're diving deep into the latest in AI, search, and kind of their broad intersection points. So first up, we have a very large, prominent company that has gone public and said they'd be interested in buying Chrome if and when Google is forced to sell. Again, big if there, but if it happens. You might have guessed who this company is, but it would pretty much change everything if they ended up with Chrome. So we'll dive into that and talk about what that means. Beyond that, we have not one, but two stories on AI overviews. One, all about how it's hurting click-through rates. You might have guessed, maybe. And another, all about how often people click on its citations. And you might not have guessed on this one. In many ways, these two stories sort of conflict, but each one has really valuable information for us as content creators. And so we'll get into those. Of course, side hustle updates, weird niches. Thomas is back with me this week. Based on all the talk on the podcast the last couple of weeks and what your weird niche is, I'm looking ahead. Super curious if we might be getting maybe a visit from a guest today.
I'm not going to say anything, but you may want to stick around for that segment.
We might have a guest of non-human form come on the podcast at some point. That would be a first in Niche Pursuits history. I'll tell you that much right now. So, but yeah, stick around for that. That is going to be potentially in the weird niche segment. Let's get to the news first. And this is kind of this big story here. I'll go ahead and pull it up on screen for those of you who are watching on YouTube. And that is that a story broke this week that should Chrome end up going up for sale, OpenAI would want to buy it. And so obviously a very big story here. Let's talk about some of the details. So we know that during this the kind of ongoing U.S. antitrust trial against Google, it's happening right now. OpenAI's head of product, Nick Turley, has testified that OpenAI would consider buying Google Chrome if regulators force Google to divest it as a remedy. Turley said OpenAI previously sought to partner with Google for search data integration into ChatGPT, and it was declined. We could talk about how obviously that kind of makes sense considering Google has their Gemini product and AI overviews. He went on to testify that search is critical for ChatGPT, especially to provide up-to-date factual answers, which we know they're kind of always working off older data, but it's still years away from building its own reliable search engine. There's a lot in here. What did you take from this, Thomas? Are you surprised? Do they seem like the likely suitor for Chrome? What do you think?
This feels to me like this almost started as a joke for us, right? We were talking about when there was the talk of them selling Chrome way back before that seemed like a real possibility. You and I were joking, oh, maybe Perplexity will buy it. Maybe OpenAI will buy it. Like, haha, that would be a funny thing. Now turns out that that's real. And I think it makes so much sense because when you think about the limiting things for OpenAI at the moment, a big one is just a lack of data. They've basically ingested everything, every book, every website, every piece of data they can buy from Reddit and places like that. And they're running out of stuff to train on. This would give them not only almost like an operating system, like basically Chrome is how most people interact with their computer at this point. They use Google Docs, they use all kinds of tools within Chrome. It kind of is the operating system in a lot of ways. They would be able to integrate directly into that. But also all that data that we know Google is using for its own search algorithms, they could use that presumably to improve their LLMs, to train better. So, I think handing Chrome over with that user base would almost create too much competition, right? Like you'd be gutting one company to improve another that's already, honestly kind of flying on its own.
Well, it's super interesting because OpenAI is backed by Microsoft. Microsoft is, their search product is Bing. We know that OpenAI and ChatGPT partner up with Bing. And so there's almost like ChatGPT saying like, yeah, Bing's not good enough, which is interesting because Microsoft owns, is it a majority or a minority share, but a lot of OpenAI. And so it's almost like a shot across the bow to Microsoft. But then again, that shot's been fired for decades. So whatever. It's also interesting because they're publicly announcing like search is vital for ChatGPT's future. And we obviously saw the launch of Search GPT, and that was fun, kind of felt like a novelty in many ways. Like, is this going to stick? I don't know what the data is on how many people use Search GPT versus the flagship Chat GPT, but it feels like Chat GPT, while operating very differently right now to a traditional Google search platform, wants to kind of go in the direction, perhaps, if I'm reading into this, of what a Google search platform looks like.
Well, if you've used ChatGPT and you have the Plus plan or higher in the last couple of weeks, or actually even more recently, last week, basically, you've probably used the new O3 model. And it actually does something really different. Instead of forcing you to say, okay, I want to use search, it, for most queries, uses search by default. It doesn't even ask you. And it goes out and tries to see, okay, is there any live information? Is there new data I can
I have
integrate
noticed that.
in here? Yeah. And it's way better. The responses are way better. Like if you ask it, where should I go to dinner tonight? It's not pulling up restaurants that maybe closed like 3 or 4 years ago in your town because that's its training cut off. But it's actually going and looking up like what are the trending restaurants on Yelp? What are there any Reddit threads about it? And you can watch what it's looking at, and the responses are way better. So before I would have been skeptical because it felt almost like, all right, is anyone really going to go and like enable this search GPT thing and use that instead of Google? But now they're just kind of baking the live search in so that it kind of subtly improves every aspect of using the system. And to me, that says, okay, they're definitely going to need good search. And I mean, Bing seems to be doing a decent job of it, but imagine that capability mashed up with Google and its ability to really like crawl and understand the internet. I feel like we could have something, again, even bigger than Google, which maybe is what the competition regulators are looking for.
I mean, ChatGPT isn't big yet, but they feel big. So I hear you saying like almost like, trading one monopolistic problem for another. But the flip side would say like ChatGPT is leading the race in the AI world, but they're not that big yet in terms of, monetization and some of the factors that maybe the DOJ would look at. So, I mean, we say this every week, we're not lawyers, we're not attorneys, but the flip side says I guess it could happen. And I mean, Chrome plus ChatGPT, what an interesting concept potentially, especially if they get access to all that data. I want to read a couple other sound bites from this article. They almost feel like an aside or somewhat related, but not entirely related. I feel like they could have done an entire article on these couple sound bites, but I didn't want to move on without reading them. Let's see here. Let's see. They're talking about Google's deals with Android phone makers such as Samsung, and they said about Google, instead of entering more exclusive agreements, however, Google loosened its most recent deals with device makers Samsung, Motorola, AT&T, Verizon, etc., allowing them to load rival search offerings. Court documents has showed. The non-exclusive agreements mirror what Google has said should be the remedy in response to what the DOJ is asking for. The DOJ wants the judge to go farther, which is what the premise of this article is about, by banning Google from making lucrative payments in exchange for installation of its search app. Now, a lot of people think that might not actually end up happening, but it sounds like Google has already kind of amended their approach in an effort to appease the courts and say, hey, look, this is what we think should happen, and we'll just go ahead and do it without you making us.
Yeah, I think I think most likely what will happen from this, and this is, again, not being a lawyer or anything, but my guess is that we'll see that kind of a change where Google can't pay to be the default. And every provider of hardware, whether that's Apple, who they pay $20 billion a year, by the way, to be the default, or, all these device manufacturers, they'll probably not be allowed to do that. I'm still skeptical that we're really going to see Chrome split off and sold. That feels like this thing you threaten and then you walk it back and it's really this other thing. I think, ultimately it shows, though, what direction OpenAI wants to go. They want better search integrated. They want to be part of your computer and device use experience. Right now, you have to go to ChatGPT in order to use it, but they want to be the default search engine or generative engine, whatever you want to call it. They want to own the browser to be integrated in there. I know they've even talked about starting a social network.
Right.
That's another kind of endpoint or kind of operating system that people use. So to me, it says less about what will really happen, because I still don't really think Chrome is going to get spun off. But it says more about OpenAI's really massive ambitions for where this product is going.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's another clear sign that their ambitions are not to remain as a, kind of proverbial chat environment, but that they're targeting so much bigger in terms of not only being the next way that people operate on the internet, search on the internet, engage with the internet, but maybe incorporating some of the best parts of the past. Well, let's talk about some of these AI overview stories. And again, as I said at the outset, in many ways, you could feel like they might conflict with each other. And I think you could make the case they do, but I think they also have a lot in common. So let's go through this first data study. And this is that the title is New Data. Google AI overviews are hurting click-through rates. Google's AI overviews are significantly decreasing clicks to traditional organic listings, especially for non-branded informational queries. Now, a lot of this you might be saying, tell me something I don't know. So some of this will be crossover or will be related to what we talked about. So we're talking click-through rates here, or CTR, and this is for those traditional organic listings. And basically, there's a couple studies that were brought in here. Ahrefs did one, and their findings from a high level was that the CTR, the click-through rate, for position one, and they looked exclusively at position number one, it dropped by 34.5% when an AI overview was present. This is across 300,000 keywords they studied. So basically, when an AI overview shows up, the ability for that number one position to gain the same number of clicks dropped by about 35%. Then AMCEV did a study, and they looked at the average CTR across, I believe, the entire first page of Google, so not just the number one position. And their findings, somewhat similarly but a little bit different, was that the average CTR drops by 15.49% when AI overviews, with declines. So that's when an AI overview is present. And then when an AI overview and featured snippet are combined, that the declines reach 37.04%. They both also found that branded keywords are less affected. First off, they rarely trigger AI overviews. One of the studies found only 4.79% of branded keyword search terms trigger an AI overview. And when they do trigger it, they actually get an 18.68% CTR boost because of the stronger user intent. So I just read off a lot of stats and a lot of data. Thomas, let's see. What stuck out to you here as it relates to CTR and AI overviews?
It just hammers home more and more how important brand is in the world today. Because, I mean, I've sort of moved my own site from looking at it as I'm providing information to really only trusting traffic from people who are coming to me because I'm me, if that makes sense. So people who are searching for my publication, people who are on my newsletter, people who are on my socials, that feels like really the only audience that truly exists at this point. And I think this that hammers the point home. Like if you're looking for a specific company, Google still wants to connect you to that company because that's clearly the intent. But if you're looking for information, increasingly, they're not even going to bother sending you somewhere else. So it, to me, really just hammers in. You can't really succeed, I think, in this environment unless you're in very specific kind of, I don't know. I think there's some niches where people might look for an e-com product, for example, without knowing the name of the company. But beyond that, it really feels like you have to build that brand. And if you don't, it's just getting eroded and eroded. The snippets, the AI overviews. If we move to a full AI mode, like Google has shown, I think that's going to cause it to drop even more. If, OpenAI buys Chrome and everything is going through ChatGPT, that's going to drop it even more. So yeah, I think just building that brand is just that much more important these days.
Yeah, I mean, this study would continue to pile on that the narrative Google tells us, which is that AI overviews is actually kind of designed to, give more clicks and to continue to reward publishers more and more. Like this would say that that's not the case. I mean, everything in this article, unlike other studies we hear and other things, last week Spencer and I covered a topic on LinkedIn where when you include a link in your post, it actually increases the amount of click-through rate and stuff like that. And that was surprising, right? But when it comes to AI reviews, I think this one just passes the smell test. Like it seems correct when Google's giving you the answer summarized above the fold. It does tend to. What's interesting is that we definitely found featured snippets. When you got the featured snippet, for the most part, your clicks would increase. And with AI overviews, it does not look like that's the case, at least when it comes to informational queries. So maybe data confirmed. I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. Okay, let's dovetail that now with this next AI overviews study. And this one might surprise you. That's kind of why I teased it this way. Let me find where I'm at here. Okay, got a lot of tabs open, folks. This one is titled Google AI Overview Study. 90% of B2B buyers click on Citations. So this new research suggests that 90% of B2B, so business to business buyers, click through to cited sources. And then it talks about here's how this could reshape your approach to content visibility. Okay, let me kind of pull out the sound clips that I thought were interesting here. Basically, if you go through this article, I'll read this part right here. When AI summaries first appeared in search results, many publishers worried about zero-click searches reducing traffic. And again, zero-click is where no one needs to leave the SERPs, the search engine result page, but instead they get all their answers right there. And that's kind of what AI overviews could do. However, this research study, which was done by a Trust Radius study, Trust Radius report, and their data is that 72% of B2B buyers see AI overviews during search. And the study suggests that B2B tech searches work differently than perhaps the standard consumer. It shows that while traffic patterns are changing, many users in their sample don't fully trust AI content yet, and they often look and check sources to verify what they've read. So here's a direct quote from the report. These overviews cite sources, and 90% of buyers surveyed said that they click through the sources cited in AI overviews for fact-checking purposes. Buyers are clearly wanting to fact-check. They also want to consult with their peers, which we'll get into later. So a couple things here. This is an interview rather than a data study, right? That's the take I have on it. And then next, it's a B2B environment. And so we can make a lot of assumptions about B2B. Maybe making a business purchase is a lot different than what toppings to put on pizza for your average consumer, maybe. There are a lot of things we can kind of get into here, but I think in general, from a high level, for publishers, especially publishers in the B2B space, encouraging information.
Yeah, I think like you pointed out, I mean, you're a math guy, you have a stats background. I think there's a little bit of a survey problem here in that if you ask somebody, okay, how did you choose your new accounting software? Did you just put it in, check the thing that shows up in the overview, click through and buy it? Or did you go and do some careful background research? Nobody is going to say, oh yeah, I just, spent $100,000 of my company's money without doing any due diligence. Everybody, even thinking if there's any chance my boss is going to see this, I'm just going to say, oh, sure. Yeah, I did all the research. So I'm a little skeptical about that because, again,
you called it out. I wasn't going to cut to it right away, but you did because I'm the same way. I'm like, it's all in how you ask the question. If you ask the question in a way,
are you careful or not careful?
Yeah.
Are you reckless
do you
or
good?
Look
dumb, or do you want to look smart? Like people are just going to say what? So well, fair's fair. I agree with you. It's all about how you ask the question. I don't know the exact way the question was phrased, but it certainly strongly implies that it's a survey and not data driven. So fair enough. Maybe lean into the fact that there's more truth than not to what was found. And let's talk about that, though.
Yeah, I think, despite that, it's probably true that when people are making a B2B purchasing decision, they're in general just going to do a lot more research. And I think about that as like you said, a lot of the queries people are putting in are much more informational and can be answered pretty comprehensively by an AI overview. Honestly, like if I ask a question that might be answered on my own website on the Bay Area Telegraph, so you might say, what's a good walking trail in Lafayette, California? And the AI overview will say, the Lafayette Reservoir. They'll go, great. Okay, I'll go and do that. If I ask what's the process to get a business license in Contra Costa County? And it says, here, this is, you just fill out this form and send it in. I'm probably not going to risk the future of my business on that response. I'm probably going to at least click on the link and make sure that's the right form and I'm sending it to the right address and everything. So I just think when there's more at stake, which there usually is with B2B queries, then you're going to get more research. And I bet if you ask the same question about other kind of your money or your life types of queries, like medical things, that kind of stuff, I bet people would do the same thing. Like use it as a jumping off point with the AI, but actually check the links and do a bit more research. And I think it just says you actually, if you're in a niche where more data and more background is required, or you're writing on topics like that, you might do better than people whose questions could be answered comprehensively or have low stakes information where people are willing to take the risk. That bodes well if you're talking more about those B2B topics or programming or something where there's going to be some follow-up needed.
Yeah, and those are all the kind of assumptions I do think are fair to make. I think that it's fair to assume like, hey, we know B2B operates very differently. I know I've worked with a lot of different companies over the years, and certainly the engagement levels on B2B content, B2B email newsletters. I mean, it's just a whole different ballgame. A B2B email newsletter versus a B2C email newsletter, for example. Content is engaged with in a far different manner. So all of it tracks and makes sense. And it does, the bedrock, it does come down to the fact that like a business decision is far different than a personal decision. And there's just different weights that are placed on it. It does strongly suggest, though, that like if you are in a B2B niche, you know, AI overviews might not be as negative as you might fear. It almost takes us back to that first story we featured in AI overviews. And man, I wish we could have segmented that between B2C queries and B2B queries. I don't know if that would have been possible. That is a little harder. It's easier to just lop off all informational queries and then do a study on that. But boy, that would be fascinating to see the difference there in the click-through rate on a B2B informational query versus a B2C informational query.
Yeah, I mean, just to give some data, like on my site, a typical click from somebody who's not an existing user, maybe 30 seconds, average time on site. From somebody on my newsletter, it's about 2 minutes, so a much higher engagement. One of my clients who's in an e-com space, their average time on site across all users is 11 minutes. So think about that difference. I mean, that's to content people. It's like, whoa, but that's pretty typical for e-com because people who are coming to a B2B site, a lot of deep content, a lot of good content, you know, it takes a long time. People are willing to put that time in. So yeah, just sort of, I mean, wrapping all these together, what it says to me is like, if you have the ability to change the type of content that you're doing, or, you know, you can hone in on topics to cover in the face of AI overviews, certainly brand, very important. Like if you can avoid the AI overview being triggered in the first place, that's a huge win. So if you can get people searching for your brand, then that makes a big difference. But beyond that, if it's, you know, B2B or by extension, I think we can think of it like, you know, content where you need more time, where you're willing to put in the effort, where more is at risk if you make the wrong choice. People seem more willing with that kind of content to skip beyond the AI and to actually do the reading. And certainly, you know, if OpenAI builds its own browser and social network and AI is even more prominent in the way people consume information, having those elements of depth to your content, brand to your content, that's going to become even more important, no matter whether it's Google and AI overviews or some other tool.
Yeah, we'll see a little example of brand playing a role in my weird niche, not at a large scale, but it'll kind of paint the picture of, even at a smaller scale, how brand can not only insulate you from some of these issues, but also insulate you from a lot of the Google's up and downs that come in their algorithm, you know, when the primary driver of traffic is your brand or your brand term. Yeah, it is interesting as we all adapt and evolve and shift to, you know, the world that's changing as it is. You know, for many years, long was the approach that B2C content was easier to publish, easier to rank, and then there was a lot more of it available, right? Like if you took a niche in the B2C space, you could write hundreds and hundreds of articles on it, where if you narrowed down into a B2B market, you know, you're going to deal with a lot more expertise. It's going to take a lot longer to crank out content. It's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot more expensive, and your pool of topics is a little bit more limited. Well, you know, that's starting to shift perhaps into being one of the ways to continue to get traffic from a Google or these kind of places, because it's harder, because it's where there isn't as much ability for maybe, you know, AI to come in and take it over. So I don't know. I think there's some interesting findings here. I think some of it is probably pretty obvious to people, or at least makes sense. And I think some of it is maybe makes sense once you think about it a little more.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say is that it does, I think, argue for creating a distinct brand. I think a lot of us kind of try to piggyback on terms that aren't really branded terms. Like we try to do exact match domains, and we try to name our website something that people might search. I think that worked in the old kind of space. But now, you know, if your website is just a search term, it's going to be a lot harder for Google to determine, hey, is this a branded query or not? And I've run into that with clients too, where they've chosen a basically like a, not on purpose, but they've chosen a term that is an industry term as their brand name or company name. And you see a lot more AI overviews triggering. You see just a lot more confusion from Google of what kind of traffic to send them. Versus if you have a totally made up brand and every time somebody enters that in, they're only looking for you, that's going to be easier for Google to sort of switch off that AI overview and send folks your way. So I think it's almost like a reversal of that exact match domain concept. Maybe that still works for certain things. Maybe for calculator websites, for example, it's still a good fit. But to me, it argues for putting in that time, and it does take more time to make people aware of a totally unique branded term. But if you end up owning that term, it's crystal clear to Google and probably to OpenAI and everyone else, hey, this intent is to go to this specific brand versus, if I just called my website like Bay Area travel tips and somebody put that in, it's not at all obvious.
Well, I'll leave this article with a quote from Kevin Indig, who we have had in the podcast in years past. He quoted the report. It was quoted in the report stating, the era of volume traffic is over. Kind of like what I was referring to a little bit earlier there, but he said it better. The era of traffic volume is over. What's going away are clicks from the super early stage of the buyer journey. But people will click through visits sites eventually. Maybe a typo there. I think we'll see, and this is the impactful one, I think we'll see a lot less traffic, but the traffic that still arrives will be of higher quality. And so really at that point, it's not as much of a volume game. And so the ad model of monetizing sites that a lot of us have used, that relies on volume, right? We don't really care that much about the quality of traffic. We do. I mean, certain regions are monetized better. Obviously, we know that the cookie data on them is important, but generally it's a volume play, right? Like you're generally going to be in the $20 to $40 RPM. Generally, it's about volume. And so what Kevin is saying and kind of what this article, what this report, what all this stuff is suggesting is like, hey, that model might also be harder and harder, but monetizing through higher per visit profitability numbers, things like selling products, things like selling, courses or selling direct to the consumer, the quality of the traffic could actually improve for those more bottom of the funnel queries.
To me, from a content perspective, though, I think there's still a way to play this. And what I've done with it is really, again, emphasizing newsletters and capturing some portion of that audience. Because yes, if it's a volume play and you're getting less traffic, then you're going to make less money if your goal is just to have that person come and get the information and leave. If you get them into your newsletter and you're sending them an email every single day, well, then there's your volume, over time. So the way I like to think about it is, yes, the quality is better, but think about, maybe on raw traffic from all over the place, your newsletter conversion rate where people sign up is 3 to 5% if you're doing a good job. If Google's sending you the most engaged users and suddenly those people are converting at 20%, or they're sending you only the people who were going to sign up anyway, then yeah, you might lose a little bit on the front end. But if you can get them into your newsletter over time, you can be sending them your content. They're your most interested users, and you can still make that content play work. So that's the pivot I've personally made, because I don't really like selling like info products and having to push stuff all the time. I like my site to be free. I like it to not be salesy. I like it to be ad driven. But if you can, kind of create the content that really engaged person's going to want to read, and then get them into your own funnel and your own audience that you control, that still captures a lot of the value we would have seen from search before.
Hey everyone, Spencer here, founder of Niche Pursuits. So you probably know the importance of building internal links so your site can perform well in Google. Today I want to share how Link Whisper can help you add outbound internal links to your articles. As you draft your article in WordPress, Link Whisper scans your site, identifying the best internal link opportunities. It then recommends the perfect anchor text and link to add. With just a click, your content is updated with new internal links. No more expensive tools or tedious manual site searches. Link Whisper does the heavy lifting right inside the WordPress editor. Say goodbye to the hassle of internal linking. With Link Whisper, you can focus on what you do best, creating great content. Use the coupon code podcast today and get $15 off. Elevate your website's internal linking with Link Whisper now. Building smart internal links just got easier. Go to linkwhisper.com today and be sure to use coupon code podcast to get $15 off.
Well, interesting stories this week for sure. Certainly the lead-in story, Chrome and OpenAI, just a suggestion at this point, but wow. And then some of these nuances of what we're dealing with every single day of our lives, this AI overview situation and what it's doing to content and how people are engaging with it, how much people are reading and clicking on citations and stuff inside of AI Overview. So a lot of stuff to continue to pay attention to. It's time, though, for us to transition to our next segment, Side Hustles. Thomas, I don't know how you leapfrogged me here on our little internal agenda, but you did, which means you get to go first today.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I think I maybe replaced Spencer's stuff in the doc we're using here.
All good.
Happy to dive in.
Hey, I'm like Ron Burgundy. I just follow what the teleprompter says. So you're up.
Exactly. So I'm giving an update on YouTube. And actually, I kind of have a question for the audience and for you too on this. I've shared before, my main YouTube channel is called DIY Life Tech. And it really answers a lot of sort of very, I would say, basic but impactful questions about stuff you use on a day-to-day basis. Like, your Swiffer WetJet stopped spraying. What do you do about it? And that seems a little silly, but people collectively waste hundreds of hours of time on solving these little problems. I rented a Chevy Malibu and I can't figure out how to fuel it. How do I open the fuel door? If you've ever punched a printer, because you got so frustrated with it, or chucked your phone across the table because you couldn't figure something out, that's sort of the person that the channel is targeting. And it's done, pretty well with that. I have probably about 3,000 videos. It makes generally somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 a month in revenue. In March, I made $1,913. This is all just from the ads in YouTube on the channel. That's about typical for this time of year. As you can imagine, as people are trying to figure out their holiday presents, how to use them, December is always my best month.
Makes sense.
So that's, continuing to do really well. Simultaneously, as I shared before, I kind of mistakenly started this AI in real life channel. This is where I've been posting video tutorials for my AI newsletter. And that one is now at 282 subs. It's at almost 300 watch hours. And it's pretty much almost like a brand new channel. Now, I'm trying to figure out at this point, where do I go with that? On the one hand, I've got this monetized channel that is already making money on every video that I upload. And I tested, what if I take an AI video and put it on there? Is it like too weird and out there for the audience? So I did an AI tutorial. It was about how to create AI videos with Luma, which is an AI video generator. And I put it on my main channel and it got so far 3,800 views. So it's doing better than a lot of the stuff on my AI channel. And I made, $25 from it so far, just from the ads. It took me probably 5 minutes to shoot. So I've got a bit of a dilemma because it's very hard to motivate yourself to grind at building this brand new channel when you could post the videos to this other one and be making money from day one and have a bigger audience. On the other hand, I'm kind of skeptical, is this too far of a departure from how to use your WetJet, your Swiffer WetJet, to how to create an AI video? Is it going to offend the algorithm and degrade my existing channel because I don't want to lose my $2,000 a month from that? Or maybe my audience likes both topics, or maybe they want to hear what I'm talking about and they'd love to see more AI stuff on there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear people's thoughts in the comments too. That's a dilemma I'm facing now.
I mean, I also wonder if as part of that conversation, it does feel like two different types of channels. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, and I don't know, the data would be there, I'm sure, if you dove deep and cared to analyze it. But the DIY Life Tech channel feels like it probably gets most of its traffic, not from subscriber watch hours, but from non-subscriber watch hours, from people going like, I have this Swiffer WetJet that won't do what it's supposed to YouTube. And you show up and they're like, awesome. But I'm curious if someone at the end of that goes, well, that was awesome. I'm going to subscribe so I can figure out how to get my toaster oven to work next time. I just wonder if it's very much like getting most of its traffic, and then therefore it's monetization based on like people, search queries that people type into YouTube and then you responding. Whereas the AI channel feels like a channel I would subscribe to if I'm interested in AI, and I would begin to rely on you as my AI voice, producing consistent content that's in my ear every week about the newest and latest happenings in AI. And that feels like, although it's such early days, I wonder if you would even have enough compelling data to know, but that feels more like a channel you subscribe to and you watch pretty much whatever is being posted on that channel for the most part. And it's driven more by subscribers and their watch hours than by search watch hours.
I think that's a great point. So I'm looking at the data for DIY life tech. This is actually pretty amazing. I didn't realize it was this dramatic.
99%.
It's probably up there. 55.7% external.
Yep.
So that's stuff that's either embedded in a website, or, and that tracks. People do embed these videos. I embed them on my own site, that kind of thing. Also, that probably picks up people who find it in Google search.
Yep.
So it shows up in an AI overview, et cetera.
Shows up in a video carousel.
Yeah. Second top one, 36.4% YouTube search. So people searching on YouTube. Second
Two
biggest
of those
search
are over
engine in
90%.
the world. So yeah, what is that combined? That's like 90, 91, 92% is coming not from any kind of recommendation. Yeah, only 2.7% suggested videos, 2.4% browse features. So you're right. It is a search-driven channel.
And I
don't have data on my other one.
The 99% I was saying was non-subscriber watch hours. I would wonder about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Growing that channel took such a long time because you're right. Nobody subscribes to a channel because they learned how to fix their Chevy Malibu's gas tank that they rented for a road trip, and decides they're going to come back. It took me forever even to reach 1,000. Now I'm at, I think, 17,000 subs on that channel or something. The growth in subscribers has been a lot faster. Contrast that AI in real life, 39.6% is from browse features. So YouTube showing my videos to other people because they're interested. So yeah, that's a great point. It's not just the content, it's where people are coming from.
I mean, I think in the long term, we just got done talking about building a brand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was more on the Google search side of things, but Google owns YouTube. They obviously don't follow the same pattern. YouTube still cares about small publishers. Can't say the same about Google or Google search. But I mean, the AI channel feels more of a brand, and it feels like long term, that's the type of channel that will get rewarded long term if you can just cross that chasm of getting monetized.
I guess that means I have to keep plugging away at videos that don't make me anything
just one
for
man's
a while
opinion.
longer.
Just one man's opinion.
Well, I'd love to hear I think you're right. Unfortunately, I'd love to just start, dumping a bunch of great AI related content, my own content about AI on my main channel and start collecting more and more money from it. But I think you're right. But yeah, I'd love to hear people in the comments want to let me know what you think about it. Would definitely love to hear, but I think you're right. I probably do have to keep building that channel the right way.
My final thought is I think you're getting views on the AI content on your DIY channel because YouTube understands that it's a high quality channel, that when people show up and they watch your videos, they like them, they stay. The thumbs up rate is high, all that sort of thing. But you clearly don't have a subscriber base around that. And so you're just picking up on that search traffic. Well, as you build that authority on your AI channel, you'll get that traffic plus a growing subscriber base of people who YouTube is going to handpick through their algorithm that loves this kind of content. So I do think the short-term rewards would be higher over than DIY channel, but I think the long-term rewards of continually publishing this hard-hitting, up-to-the-date, engaging AI content is just going to continue to curate an audience around that's going to reward you long term.
I think that's a great point. So I'll keep to the toaster tutorials, as we know, live on their own channel, but everything else in your home, I'll stay on Life Tech. And yeah, I guess I'll have to keep, unless somebody comes in the comments and says something really groundbreaking in the other direction that I should be aware of. I think you're totally right. So
yeah,
great.
Maybe the fact you're having a hard time justifying all the effort for this AI channel is because you also have a toaster channel, and I think you have a Starbucks channel, and I think you have the side hustle thing, man. You got to keep yourself in check before it takes up too much of your time. Okay, well, my turn. I'm talking about last week. I touched on it, and my website that got hit by the HCU, and then we've made that nice dramatic comeback to profitability, mainly driven by Pinterest traffic, and had a wonderful run through the holidays and January and February because of the niche it's in. Does very well in January, February. had a slowdown the last couple of months, mainly due to both the RPMs dropping a lot and traffic kind of coming down because of the seasonality of it. And early in the year, and I wrote about this in the Weekend Growth newsletter, I had noticed in Q4 that a lot of my traffic was seasonal based. And a lot of people listening to me like, well, duh. But like a lot of my traffic was the stuff that was focused around Thanksgiving and Christmas, with Thanksgiving being the notable one. I remember just kind of taking a step back and going like, wow, that Thanksgiving content did really well in the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving. And so one of the things I had done early this year, January and February, was sit down and do Pinterest research, keyword research in Pinterest for more seasonal topics, because what I'm seeing is that seasonal topics get a much higher lion's share of traffic on Pinterest than the same topics would do in Google. Meaning if I had an article about something Thanksgiving specific, I would get a bump leading up to Thanksgiving, but the bump was significantly higher on Pinterest in Q4. And so I sat down and just wanted to create more seasonal content and publish it. So, that was in January and February. And so there's been some holidays, but, I missed the Super Bowl because I was a little late for that. Not St. Patty's Day in March, but, it's not like a big holiday, but a big one that just happened was Easter. And I had produced about 28 articles that were Easter and Passover related. So that was the biggest volume play I've done to this date for a seasonal or just a date, a holiday. And last week, I noticed a big traffic bump. So I got about 35% of my traffic last week was related to these 28 articles. And, that led to a good bump in earnings because it definitely improved the amount of traffic I got from Pinterest. And so it was very interesting to notice. Now, there's a couple of things there. The content was planned months in advance. So again, you just probably not as much as what you would need in a traditional search environment, but you need to be publishing content a couple months minimum in advance for Pinterest to kind of find it, pick it up. You don't want to publish it the week of. Makes sense. You got to start that process kind of early and then publish that content. And I'm going to repeat it now. I'm going to, continue doing it for some of the other holidays. I've already been publishing for Mother's Day. I think Father's Day will start publishing soon. 4th of July, these kind of holiday events coming up. But it also it's interesting because I think that from a high level, seasonal kind of undoing my mindset about focus on evergreen content, which is kind of ingrained into our brains as SEOs. It's still important to do that. I still look at my number one post last week was still an evergreen URL that has been doing well, whether it's Easter week or not. But I'm definitely training my brain to put a higher focus on some seasonal content for sites that are driven by more social traffic like this.
I think, both of those are very food-centered holidays too. So if you're in that niche, people for St. Patrick's Day, they're not necessarily thinking about things other than food, let's say, in terms of what they'll be consuming. But both Easter and Passover are very food-centered holidays. So I think if you're looking at the specific niche and looking at what are people going to look for, and then I think about Mother's Day, like breakfast in bed, people who might want to create something as a nice meal, like they're going to go all out. They're going to find, something unique and something they're not going to be making on a day-to-day basis. So they're going to do a lot of research to find the right option on that. It feels like an area where you can go into that a lot more than, some of these other holidays. Like July 4th, we're going to make burgers and hot dogs. There's probably not going to be so much, research going into it. But what strikes me is I've been talking for a while about the shift is sort of from evergreen to almost news content, right? Content that is timely. And I often get people kind of push back and say, okay, well, my niche isn't a news niche. Like there's nothing that I can do that ties into breaking news stories. Well, seasonality is news.
It is news.
It creates, an opportunity to publish something that's basically news content. I think you found the same trend I'm seeing in more of a traditional news space. This is how you apply it to a non-news niche.
I think that so much of what I've learned about SEO translates over to a Pinterest. That's why I love it. It's a bit like the Google of social media, and it is really kind of fun to see that translated to just an easier application of my skills than trying to go out and dance my way through TikTok or, all the other different things. But I think, I'll just voice it. If you're wondering, if you're sitting there going, well, but Jared, what about the elephant in the room? Yeah, I had to produce 28 pieces of content for a week or two of traffic a year. And is that worth it? I don't know. I share, by the way, I shared all this week with the Weekend Growth newsletter, including like screenshots and all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for less of a conversation, more of an in-depth guide, that's where I share this kind of stuff. But I was talking about that in the email. Is like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Mm-hmm. And on one side, it's like, no, it's not. Like, that's why I love publishing evergreen content, is because once it ranks, you can just get traffic consistently week in, week out. And it's not about something that trends or that comes around once a year. The flip side is the reality that traffic is much harder to come by these days. And if you kind of know that if you publish content about a topic and you can find a way, to do it in a way that, like maybe not 28, maybe it's 15 articles, maybe you can kind of find that balance through trial and error. It's a much easier path to traffic than some of the other alternatives, because those have gotten a lot harder. So if you're asking, is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't know yet. I as we do here in this site, I'm just kind of sharing what I'm seeing. I wanted to try it. I'm super glad it worked. I would definitely say it worked. Now I've got to figure out, like, long-term, is it worth kind of doing this every single holiday? How do you pick the holidays? What are you going on? Now you got to figure out the details, right?
What I've experienced personally is that, yes, it's very limited in time, but at the same time, these holidays happen every single year. So, and the shelf life on this content, I don't know on Pinterest, but certainly in other places, it can be very, very long. So I think about, my day job is as a news photographer. I run a photo agency, and I have photos in our collection that show Thanksgiving, for example. Everything about cooking a turkey. We have historical photos from the 50s. We have, modern photos. They're only going to sell for a week out of every year, but for a decade, the same photos have sold. And in some cases, these are from historical newspaper archives where they've probably been selling that photo for, in some cases, 100 years, every single year, because every year, like clockwork, everybody needs that Thanksgiving photo. And so I think it maybe isn't worth it if you're looking at it just as the one time around. And what I've seen, though, is also over time, if you have good content, it becomes the article. If you're looking for that specific recipe, then and yours comes out, I don't know exactly what space you're in with this particular site, but if you're creating something that's a guide for a particular holiday or photos for a particular holiday or whatever it happens to be, then that's going to keep recurring over and over again. You're going to each year pick up a little more traffic, a little more notoriety, a little more authority on that. And so it not only isn't sort of time limited in the way a lot of news content can be, but it actually can kind of snowball and build over time till you're the Thanksgiving photo that people are always going to end up using.
The other difference, and I've kind of commented on this as it relates to Amazon Influencer, I've talked about getting down and doing all these videos on Christmas decor in September, is that it's so weird to be doing all this Easter content in January when it's like dead of winter. But I guess we'll get used to that. Next up, 4th of July content, but at least it's sunny out. So it kind of just feels like a cooler version of 4th of July. But anyways, all right. Final segment, weird niches. I teased at the outset, Thomas, we even give you a hard time last week when you aren't here. About some of the websites that you pick and how they're so closely aligned sometimes with your interest levels. I won't bury the lead here, but I'm just curious, given the topic du jour, what we're going to have for you in our weird niche site.
Yeah, I'm going to take a moment to step off camera here and bring in an exciting new guest.
I knew it. I just knew it, folks. I did not know this in advance. Thomas and I have not spoken actually in 2 weeks. And yes, there we have it. For those of you who are watching on camera, you are getting the first Niche Pursuits visitor that is not of human form. For those of you that can't see on camera, that is a, less than a week old chick?
Yep, about 3 days old now. So yeah, and I have, as you may have heard, cheeping if you're listening or paying attention on the background here. I actually have 15 of these guys.
Wow.
Next to me here in the office. So whether I wanted, the cheaping to happen in the background or not, it's here. And yeah, these are the newest addition to my backyard flock. I hinted before, I think I talked about bringing eggs, getting eggs, and hatching eggs for the first time. So yeah, these guys actually started to be hatched on Easter, believe it or not, and
Wow.
they're about 3 days old at this point.
Every cliche combining in one moment.
Yep, there you go.
And speaking of cliches, I have to admit, that is a cute little chicken right there.
They are adorable. Yeah, you think like, oh, I'm going to be immune to the cuteness, and then you see like that just sitting next to you. It's very hard to be productive for me here at the moment.
Oh god, as soft as ever, I imagine.
Yes, they're totally fluffy. They come in all different colors and patterns and everything, and that's actually a perfect tie-in to my my weird niche for today. So I had to bring a chicken. I'm going to have to share a chicken-specific one. I'm going to put this guy back.
I can see in the agenda that we're talking about chicken websites. I don't know how you have found so many off-the-wall chicken websites, but you have.
Yes, I have. So this one is cacklehatchery.com, and it's a little different. It's not necessarily the content site that I shared before. So this one has been around for a long time. The company has existed since 1936. So we're talking almost 100-year-old company. And basically what this is a company where you can buy chicks and have them shipped to you through the mail, which seems, if you're not in a rural place, might seem a little crazy. Like, oh, you can actually have chicks shipped to you. If you live in a place where you have a 4-H club or whatever, it's going to be completely familiar that this happens. It's very possible to ship live chicks. And what you can do here, as you're seeing on the screen, if you're looking, you can actually choose the specific types of chicken that you want. People collect chickens. They choose different breeds of chicken, and you can select a particular one. You can even do kind of like a drill down or filter for the color of egg. Like, do you want brown eggs or white eggs? Do you want Easter eggers, which lay colorful eggs? Do you want an olive egger, which lays, green eggs? Do you want a chicken that's pure black? There's chickens that are exotic that have pure black feathers. I'm seeing a black English Orpington. And so basically you choose the chicks that you want. There's a 3 chick minimum, and they have specific times a year where they're selling these. And you sign up, and then they literally ship you for about, it looks like $6 to $15 per chick. These chicks in the mail overnight. There's a way that the USPS apparently allows you to do that. And you can start your own flock, dialing in the exact type of chicken that you want. Now, that seems like it should be kind of a very specific niche that probably isn't getting a ton of traffic. If you put it into Ahrefs, though, it's completely the different story. So this site is a DR59, and look at the traffic number on that. 250,000 uniques from search per month on this site. And look at the first term, speaking of branded traffic.
Okay. And look at the volume is look at that.
Cackle Hatchery. Yeah, their brand name. And look at that volume. Yeah, 28,000 searches a month just for their brand name. So this company has basically won at e-commerce and won at search by not only owning super lucrative terms like chickens for sale, baby chicks for sale, chicken hatchery. They're ranking 1 or 2 for a lot of these things. They're ranking for specific types of chicken, but their brand name is getting more organic traffic than most of our entire websites are getting, honestly, at this point, post HCU. So again, beyond the fact that you can order chicks on the internet, you can have these adorable little guys, shipped to your door if you don't want to go through the hassle I did of hatching them. This tells a story about the power of branded traffic and how if you've got a really good e-com site, I imagine people probably spend 5-10 minutes, researching their ideal chicken before they make their purchase. And if you've got a strong brand, you can still clean up and search.
So I'm noticing, and I came back out to the overview screen to get the last 5 years, a couple of things. First off, sharp increase, according to Ahrefs, in November, December of this past year. Mm-hmm. And we know that there has been quite the buzz around chickens because of the egg shortage and problems at least in the United States around that. I'm curious if you think or know how much of this, they've almost doubled in traffic in the last 6 months. Is that related to, Google rewarding them through algorithmic changes, or is that related to just an increase in search volume?
What I've observed is that there's a huge demand for backyard chickens at the moment. I know the farmer, the reason I hatched my own this year was that the farmer I normally get baby chicks from is just not even doing it. There's like too many people who want baby chicks this year. And I've actually had chicken brands reach out to me about the DIY Life Tech channel, asking if I'll do chicken content for them or review their chicken product. That had never happened before. So yes, I think there is an increase in demand and they are riding that wave.
And my follow-up to that would be, I'm seeing, and it's right on the edge of the 5-year graph, and I can't go back I can go back all the time. Oh, good. Let's see what this looks like. Yes. So here we are looking, well, I don't know. I was going to ask about COVID, right? Because I also remember that a lot of people were doing all sorts of at-home things during, lockdowns and shutdowns and that sort of thing. And sure enough, here we see once again a traffic bump right around November, December in 2019. But really, we see this huge traffic upswing right around that COVID time period, and then a massive drop off. And I'm just also wondering if we're seeing both some obviously, traffic at 250,000 organic, like Google likes this site, but also are we really seeing the ebbs and flows of the interest in chickens play out here in their traffic graph?
Yeah, and if you look at their inventory, they are low on chickens. Like they have a supply problem clearly here. So I'm thinking you're right. They're having a little trouble responding to the demand for chickens. So, you heard it here first, folks. If you're looking for a new side hustle, hatching some adorable little guys like that and finding maybe some local folks to buy them, this could rival Spencer's pallets in terms of overall potential.
Who would have thought? You were well positioned when, as a chicken owner here. What are you going to do with these chicks?
I'm hoping that a lot of them will be hens and I can keep them and get eggs. I have a farmer, another farmer I can drive about an hour away to rehome any of the roosters because I can't have them here in my neighborhood. But I've got 10 in my flock right now and full grown hens. And now I got another 15. So hopefully from this batch, I get 7-8 hens I can keep. And then I'll be at, 17 hens. And you can imagine how many eggs you get out of that. So yeah, I will not need to be buying any overpriced eggs in the supermarket. Let's put it that way.
No, you won't. How fun. What a cool niche. All right. I'll go with these last few minutes here. I don't remember where I found mine. I logged it about 2-3 weeks ago, and I cannot even remember where I found it at this point. But it's very interesting. I'll say that much. Okay. So my website is wordfinder.com. And at first glance, you could say this is just another dictionary site, right? Or another site that is kind of helping you, kind of find the meaning of words. But it's really, really fascinating, actually, I think. Tell me if you agree. It's what it specializes in is translation from different languages, from one language to another. And I think that that's where it really gets interesting. You'll see as I pulled up on screen, that is, you basically have a drop down where you can go from one language to another. So I can go, let's just say the drop down from English, and then I can go to, let's go Finnish. And so here are different dictionaries that help me translate the Finnish language into the English language. And there's a couple here, and it's kind of hard to figure out which one to go with. But if you go back to the word finder and you come in here to the dictionary section, you can see they have like hundreds of these. I could just scroll, and here's Danish to German and German to Danish. Here's Danish to Italian, Danish to Spanish, Danish to Swedish, Dutch to Danish, Dutch to English, Dutch to Finnish, Dutch to French. If I come over here to Ahrefs, sadly, this site does not do very well in organic search. It is a DR38, but it's only ranking for 123 keywords with an estimated traffic of under 1,000. Interestingly, it is ranking for its, and have you ever seen this before, Thomas? Not only its brand name, but the actual website with a .com in it. I don't think I've ever seen that in Ahrefs before. So its number one keyword is wordfinder.com, which isn't that direct traffic, not a search term?
You would think so. I mean, again, that's an ultimate example of somebody putting something into a search engine with an intent to just visit the site. And if Google popped up an AI overview for that, that would be completely wrong, right? Like you clearly just want to visit that URL.
I agree with you. Let me just share this. How's it making money? Let me come back out to the homepage. So this is interesting. Basically, the way they make their money is that it's a subscription. So it's 7 days for free, and then £5.99 per month. Cancel online anytime. And so, all of a sudden, when you move away, this is exactly what we talked about earlier. When you move from a volume game and a traffic game and into, like in this case, a subscription game, and this feels very bottom of the funnel, right? Like this isn't like, oh, help me figure out what word, what the finished word is for this. This feels like a very business-oriented use case. And all of a sudden, when you move from that volume game and into a subscription play on bottom of the funnel content, I don't know. You probably don't need a ton of traffic to at least make a living wage here. If you read some of the testimonials here, you'll see it's a business community that's taking advantage of this. The Bolgi company has used WordFinder for several years. We translate text from Swedish to English, and WordFinder is an indispensable tool in this work. And this is from the Bolgi company, right? So clearly is a B2B use case. And while they're not getting much traffic and while they're not charging very much, when you're kind of just living in the bottom of the funnel and you're living in a subscription, £6 a month, that's, just under £100 a year. Like you don't need a ton of clients to make a decent amount of income.
I put this into Ahrefs, and I think they've made a mistake on an SEO perspective here, because if you put wordfinder.com into Ahrefs, it's still not great, but it's a little higher. It's like 1,200 uniques per month, and it's going to a wider variety of pages on the site. What they've done, though, is when you go to wordfinder.com in an English-speaking country, they're redirecting you to the /en.
They are. You're right.
It looks like Google and it looks like they're treating that almost like a subdirectory or subdomain rather, instead of a subdirectory. So it almost looks like a new site, but it's actually been around longer. And if you go to the main site without this /en, then you see that the top traffic for them, the top term is Wordfinder, and it's coming from Sweden. And it actually gets 400 clicks per month on that specific branded term in that geography.
And that would make sense.
To me, it says, they did a bad job of handling their redirects for localization. They're probably losing traffic. But again, getting to our original point in the AI overviews, they're not getting a ton of traffic. But if your niche is people in Sweden looking to translate to other languages, and you're getting 400 people a month, and you're charging £6.99 for subscription, that might be all you need to have a successful company.
I am looking it up now. I'm so glad you pointed this. I was just threw it into Ahrefs 5 minutes before we started the recording, but yeah, they do have their Href lang all set up in about probably 10 different languages here. And you're right. I mean, this is a perfect candidate. Like if you're in Sweden, this is just as applicable to you as if you're in the United States or South Africa or whatever language they have in terms of having a dictionary database. Like they could expect traffic from that region.
And I wonder if they saw this traffic coming from Sweden and created a Swedish version of the page, and then thought, we better put the English-speaking one, on its own subdomain, and maybe mistakenly, killed some of their traffic in the process. Because I think Google's seeing it the way that you saw it, which is, okay, I went to the site, it's /en, I'm being automatically redirected without even knowing about it. That might be costing them a lot of American or English-speaking traffic.
Fascinating. Well, it just always gives me ideas to what, when you move into the world of selling like a monthly subscription, like all of a sudden the game changes in terms of how much traffic you need, how many keywords you need to rank for. It's just such a different ball game. Speaking about that B2B community. So that brings us to a close here today. A lot of great topics. Certainly got the juices flowing throughout the day on B2B. And of course we got to meet probably the most adorable guest we've ever had in the podcast. No offense to anybody who's been on that before, but that probably checks the box as the most adorable one. Folks, been great to have you here today. And thank you again for watching This Week in the News. Bye-bye now.